Well, welcome back to Cardboard Swords and an instalment of the Player's Toolbox, a series designed to help players to know which cards they need. And today, we're going over how to build a flesh and blood deck. Let's get in. First thing to consider is which format you're going to be building a deck for. There are three main formats to consider, each with their own deck building restrictions. Blitz is a fast and fun format requiring a 40 card deck that contains no more than 2 copies of unique cards. Classic Constructed might be seen as Flesh and Blood's premier format. From your 80 cards you have to present a 60 card deck. And Commoner is much like Blitz, except all the cards in your deck need to be of common rarity. For deck building restrictions for all the formats, including Ultimate Pit Fight, there'll be a link in the description. The next thing you need to think about is which hero you want to build around, and there's plenty out there to choose from. You might want to look at the art on the cards or read some lore and try and choose one that speaks to you. In this game you do build an affinity with the heroes that you play, and you always remember your first. My first was Dorinthea, so that's the hero we're going to use in this example. We're going to be building a Blitz deck, which means we need a young hero. Dorinthea has 20 life and an intellect of 4, meaning we'll draw up to 4 cards at the end of our turn. Her ability triggers once per turn and allows us to swing an additional time with a weapon if it's hit. So we're already getting some clues about the direction we're going to take with this deck. We've got a weapon-centric hero who wants to attack more than once. In Flesh and Blood, much like in other card games, there are lots of different deck archetypes that exist. Aggro is short for aggressive and basically means decks that want to spend their whole hand on their turn to deal as much damage as possible. Mid-range is happy to block a little bit more and play off 2-card hands very efficiently. Control decks are more efficient in defence and set up a late game finish. Within aggro you have the go tall decks that like to do one big swing per turn like Azalea, and you have go wide decks that like to play multiple attacks on the combat chain a bit like Fi. And within all the archetypes there tends to be some element of combo, combinations of cards that provide big power turns. Dorinthea's ability relies on our weapons hitting, so we want to be going fairly tall and being fairly aggressive. It's time to get stuck into the meat of the build, and we've got to select some cards for our deck. A great way to start searching for cards is to use an online database. Fabrary is great for this, and there's a link in the description. You can find other people's deck lists here too, and there's no shame in getting some ideas from those. But stick with us if you want to build your own. In Fabrary we can find Dorinthea's specialisations, which will give us some more ideas for our build. Steelblade Supremacy is an action that makes our weapon go taller whilst also adding another on-hit effect. Singing Steelblade is an attack reaction that gives our weapon a buff, and if our opponents have blocked it we get a bonus effect. We can start to see how we want to be building Dorinthea. We want to be going tall on our weapon and adding on-hit effects. Effective card evaluation is one of the toughest things to do in the game. As an example, let's take Ironsong Response. Its pitch value is 1, which means if we pitch it, we get 1 resource. Spending an entire card for 1 resource is just inefficient, and therefore that's bad value. It blocks for 3, so a better use of this card would be to block for 3 life points. The third option for this card is to play it, and that's where things become really tricky. If our opponent hasn't blocked and we play this, it's worth 0. But if our opponent does block and we use this to get our on-hit effect from Dorinthea, we get more value. What's more is we might also add a counter to Dawnblade, gaining even more value. But at its very best it can be banished with the effect on Singing Steelblade and played from there, meaning it hasn't even cost you a card from hand and it's all value. To get maximum value from Dorinthea's ability we want to be swinging our sword more than once, which means we're going to prioritise sources of go again. We also know we want to go tall, and doing this in the reaction step makes it more tricksy, so we want to prioritise attack reactions that buff our weapon. It's all well and good having our plan, but this stuff needs to be paid for with resources. Let's consider what one of our typical turns might look like. We'll play something like Warrior's Valour that gives our sword a buff, and if it hits it'll give it go again. We then need to pay to swing with the Dawnblade, and we might play a reaction to make sure we get those on-hit triggers that we need. If it does hit, Warrior's Valour will give it go again, and Dory will allow us to swing again with Dawnblade, costing another 1. If this is an average turn we can start to think about what it costs us. 2 swings with Dawnblade and Warrior's Valour costs 3. Now pitching 2 cards to get 3 resources is an inefficient use of our cards. Really we want to be pitching 1 card, which means we need to play some number of blues. Now blue cards are more inefficient to play out than their red counterparts, but where they gain value is that they pitch efficiently. So the next thing we need to know is how many to play. And for that answer we turn to maths. Hypergeometrics sounds complicated, and well it kinda is, but the great thing about Fabrary is built right into the stats page there's a hypergeometric calculator. And this is what we can use to calculate the chances of drawing specific cards. From these stats we can see that a 40 card deck containing 13 blue cards, if we draw a hand size of 4, we're 81% likely to draw 1 or more blues. Now that's somewhere around where we want to be, although if we start to draw 2 or more of these blue cards, our hand starts to look pretty clogged up and inefficient. And we can see that with 13 cards in the deck, the chance of drawing 2 or more blue cards is at 39%, which is a little bit high, so it might be worth taking out a blue and tweaking the numbers until we find the right balance. Now it might sound stupid, but some decks fall down because they haven't got a way to actually win the game. Dealing the last few life points in Flesh and Blood can be quite tricky, and you need an end game plan to help you get over the line. We're running a single copy of Rout, which is a late game powerhouse. If we see this in the late game when our opponents are on low life and they're forced to block from hand, we know that we've got the game in the bag. Another good late game card is Overpower, and we're playing it in blue so that we'll pitch it early and then hopefully draw back into it when we need to finish the game off. And the same's true of Steelblade Shunt. Pitching this early and drawing it back up in the late game when we need to deal our last point of damage can be really effective against those heroes who like to swing their weapons at us. And by the time you've been through this process, you've pretty much arrived at your finished deck. You've got those specialisation cards that are worth including. You've added in the cards that can enact the core tenets of your plan. You add the blues that you need to make sure you've got enough resources to actually do all this. You've added in some of those cards that are going to help you get over the line and actually win those games. And by the time you've done all that, you're left with a few flex slots, which you might change depending on the type of decks you think you might be up against. And these are likely to change as you begin to play and refine your deck. If you like the look of this £25 Budget Dorinthea Blitz deck, then the link for this is in the description, but I'll be doing a deck tech on that soon. If you want to start building your own decks, I'd encourage you to head over to Fabrary after the video. Go through this process, make your list, and then you can compare this list and your own list afterwards. And that about sums it up for our deck building guide. So thanks for watching. I hope you found this content useful and enjoyable. If you did, please like and subscribe, because there's plenty more where this came from. As I said, I'll do a deck tech for the £25 Budget Dorinthea Blitz deck made in this video. We've also got gameplay and other content, so we'll see you then.